Job cuts, they were up more than 5% in June, according to the latest data from Challenger, Gray and Christmas. The number coming ahead of this Friday's big jobs report. Of course, everyone from lawmakers to blue chip chief executives are racking their brains trying to come up with a solution to the country's nagging unemployment problem. But what if the solution is in the hands of small businesses and entrepreneurs making real products that people actually want to buy? Well, we're taking a special look this week at the bottom-up economy. Our first guest is a Bloomberg best economist, Michael Englund. He joins us from Action Economics in Denver, Colorado. Michael Englund, good to have you with us. So this idea that big business, big government has not been able to stimulate the jobs that are necessary in the economy, why do they keep trying?
Well, you know, it's interesting. If you look at the breakdown between large, medium, and small firms, you can see that in ADP data. We're going to get a release tomorrow. The last cycle, we had a relatively proportional cutback in employment. But in this cycle we just went through, the 2006 to 2009 cycle, almost all the cutting was in small business. Actually, big business didn't go through nearly the cycle that small businesses did. And after the massive cuts through the cycle, we really haven't seen a recovery among small business. So we really ratcheted down that sector. I think what's happening is big businesses tend to grow at a fairly lethargic pace. So you really can't count on them for the 300,000 to 400,000 payroll gains that you tend to get in the early months of an expansion. You really got to count on small businesses to want to scramble for market share, lever up their businesses, and make investments. All
right. Well, if it really depends on small and mid-sized businesses to create the jobs, what do we need to do to make that happen, if anything?
Well, you know, I think we need more confidence in our system, and clearly the confidence numbers have underperformed in this cycle. We've made the case, even though many people watch consumption, that it really isn't consumption that's the problem in this cycle. Consumer spending has not recovered through the cycle because income hasn't. They're essentially following the economy. I think the problem we're facing is that businesses have not accelerated their investment strategies. I think we have many headwinds facing small business today. We have credit problems in the financial markets. We have concern about these budget deficit negotiations underway. We have concerns out of Europe with sovereign debt risk. I think many businesses are hanging low now, moving toward cash, and are really refraining from levering. If anything, we're still delevering what happened through this financial crisis.
Well, Michael Englund, then if you're talking about small business and their ability to deal with bad news, why do we keep looking towards big business and the government to save us? Why don't we just focus on small business and give them the confidence and the support they need to succeed?
Well, that certainly makes sense to me. You know, on a different note, in the short run, we may actually get some help from big business. One pattern we've seen through the month of June is that we seem to go into a fairly deep hole on this auto supply chain front between April and June, and it looks like auto assemblies are kicking in now at the end of June. Going into July, we're looking for quite a factory sector rebound. So actually, contrary to the broader storyline, I think you're going to see the factory sector produce a pretty solid bounce in July, and a lot of the seasonal factors looking for auto retooling that actually occurred in the second quarter occurring in July are really going to buck the pattern. So we may get some upside economic surprises in the next few months. Maybe that'll help the investment environment and maybe kickstart some of the service sector numbers, which have been underperforming the factory sector.
Michael Englund, I want to follow up on something you said having to do with the concept of confidence. Is it possible that we've been expecting too much from the government and that the government keeps pretending that they know how to manage the economy and that we're all waiting for someone else to do the heavy lifting?
Well, I certainly agree with your theme. You know, in general, at this point in the cycle, what you tend to see from the government is a series of smaller but sustained stimulus efforts and efforts to essentially reduce business costs and focus on growing the economy. I'd make the case we haven't entirely focused on that over the last year or two. And in this year 3 of the cycle, most of the focus in the media, most of the focus in the newspaper is on the debt ceiling talks, problems with U.S. sovereign debt risk, and the possibility of the U.S. losing its debt rating. I think in that kind of environment, to encourage a guy who may own a couple of Taco Bells to buy a third one is really a tough sell. Most are probably trying to find a way to ratchet down to one store and hope that they can move to cash. So I think we have to move the news flow away from some of the catastrophes that are coming down the pipeline and allow businesses to start scrambling for market share, which is usually what they do in year 3. It's usually a scramble to invest up front, gain market share for the later years of the expansion.
Michael Englund, is it also that we're spending too much time, at least in Washington, D.C., squabbling amongst Republicans and Democrats? Do small businesses sort of dislike hearing all of this combative conversation?
Well, that's probably the case. And actually, if you look at the negotiation cycles that occurred under the Clinton presidency and then earlier under Reagan, you really had two parties that were pushing pro-business agendas. They were different pro-business agendas. The ideological differences split along those lines, but both had a storyline for saving the economy. I think that's one difference we have now. Essentially now we're fighting over entitlement cuts or tax rate increases. I don't think either of those strategies sound like a positive for somebody who's a small business owner.
I want to thank you very much. Michael Englund joining us from Action Economics in Denver, Colorado.